In our last segment, Father will speak about the life and spirituality of our founder, servant of God, Frank Duff.
Frank Duff is quite different, I suppose, in some ways to Edel, Quinn and Alfie Lambe. He certainly lived a lot longer, for one thing. He was 91 when he died. So if you just think Alfie Lambe was 26 going on 27, Edel Quinn was 37, and Frank Duff lived that much longer. And the fact that he lived in Dublin, at the heart of all the Legion activity, he had such a hand really in the whole global progress of the Legion of Mary, which is vast when you think about it. Just to attend a concilium meeting alone, concilium is the headquarters there in Dublin. I've been to many meetings there, and they go on for 3, maybe 4 hours, and you hear stories of conversion, of apostolic work going on all over the world. And it's just fantastic. You come away just full of the spirit of the Legion, this apostolic zeal for souls, and just how God's grace can work through ordinary people who leave themselves at the disposal of God's grace. And that's certainly true of our 3 candidates, especially now Frank Duff. So June the 7th, November the 7th, September the 7th. All the sevens associated with Frank Duff. Born on June the 7th, died November the 7th, and the Legion was founded September 7th. So easy to remember those sevens. So interestingly, he died November the 7th, the first Friday of the month, and that's his great devotion for the Sacred Heart. I'll mention that maybe a bit later on, to do with the Pioneer Total Abstinence Association, a great love for the Sacred Heart, a temperance society in honor of Jesus in the Sacred Heart. So his cause for beatification was proposed relatively recently, at the end of the last century, not that long ago, and declared servant of God in order to get the wheels in motion in 1996. So the current status of things with Frank Duff is that all his writings are being compiled, all the interviews are being done. The tribunal, as it's called, people who knew Frank Duff are interviewed and given a strict questionnaire under oath. Then that interview is transcribed, and they read it and sign it as an authentic statement of their witness of Frank Duff. So the last figure I heard was 80 witnesses interviewed. Now I'm sure it's actually much more than that by now. That was a few years ago. And Father McGregor, the Vice Postulator, is the man who's conducting nearly all of those interviews. So he's had to interview people all over the place. In fact, he's even discovered that he's interviewed people, and many of them have died shortly after being interviewed. So Cardinal Soonans, what's the lady's name? Forgotten her name. Veronica O'Brien, several others, significant people in the Legion, and I think Father Bradshaw might be one of those too. And the interview is done, and shortly afterwards, the Lord takes them away. It's extraordinary. So if you knew Frank Duff and you have to be interviewed, maybe you're better off holding off for a while. Don't rush forward. Don't rush forward. Okay. So he was born in Dublin, Dublin's capital of Ireland, there on the east coast, and extraordinary that Frank should spend really his whole life within just a few square miles in Dublin. Okay, he went to visit England to spread the Legion a little bit himself in the early days. He made at least one trip, I think 2 trips to Rome, one in the 30s and one later on the Second Vatican Council. Spent 97 days in Rome. He wrote about it himself. Then he paid a visit to America. He came here to receive an award at Dayton University in Ohio, a Marianist Award in 1956. And he spent a bit of time in New York while I was here giving various talks. But they were really only excursions really for Frank Duff. They weren't really, strictly speaking, apostolic journeys. So really his whole life revolved around just Dublin city. And just extraordinary how this one man could have such a vast influence. So his parents, he was from quite a wealthy family. Susan, his mother, she lived till about 87, till 1950. But he had a great love for his mother, and they used to go to the movies together on a Saturday afternoon. Frank would take his mother to the movies, and he thought he was doing a good thing, bringing his mom to the cinema to watch these old black and white movies, I guess. Probably silent, I don't know, at the time. And he thought, he was getting his mom out and bringing her out and about. And she, on the other hand, thought she was doing him a turn and getting him away from the work, and that he'd have a chance to chill out, So she never particularly liked the movies, and he never liked the movies either. We'll find out later on, he used to sleep during the movie to just catch up. But he loved his mother very dearly indeed, and I think that love for his mother was reflected in his love for Our Lady and the fantastic insight he had into Our Lady and her role within the church. His dad, John Duff, he died early, 1918, and Frank was a young man at that time, and in fact he'd just finished high school, I guess really, and his dad and he himself both got an attack of typhoid, and both were seriously ill. His dad, John Duff, was affected badly by it and had to retire early from the civil service, but Frank recovered fully. Frank was close to death, in fact, even at that time too, and yet he fully recovered, and he went on to become really the breadwinner in the family, and never went on to third level education because of that. He had to support the family. So we have a picture of the family here. Frank is on the right there, and you see the prominent ears. You always know him in the picture, and he was one of 7, and they were well to do. His mother had inherited quite a sum, I think, from a brother, maybe from her father in turn, and she invested into railway stock, and years later they fell on hard times. I guess Wall Street and all that kind of thing, that maybe it was before that too, but certainly they fell on hard times and they had to move down class a little bit, and Frank had to change schools to accommodate the reduced income. So things weren't always rosy for them, but certainly he had what at the time you would consider to be a kind of a high-class upbringing, and you can tell that by the photographs, the family portraits, that they were obviously, to some measure anyway for the time, well-to-do. So you see here 6 of the 7 children in the family, lovely family. The girl seated at the back there, Letitia, I think it is, she died at the age of 13, and her twin sister had died 10 years previously at the age of 3. So Frank had already experienced bereavement in the family, as he was to experience it later on. He outlived them all by many years. But they were all exceptionally brilliant minds in his family. Frank, as much as any of the rest of them. Extremely intelligent, very bright, and from a very good background, solid family of faith and devotion. So I guess that's kind of in common a little with Alfie and Edel too, good, sound Catholic families producing, good Catholics, citizens if nothing else, but certainly apostles. There's Frank Duff in 1914, 15. I wouldn't recognize him with the moustache there. You're probably used to the different pictures. And it was around this time really that Frank's life was beginning to change radically. Certainly up to then, up to 1913 at any rate, he was living what you might call, a regular life, if you like, a professional man working in the civil service, and entered the Department of Finance. He was certainly held in high esteem in the civil service for his dedication to his work and his brilliant mind and his brilliant application as well. So 1913 came, and Frank, living kind of a bit of the high life, he was quite popular among his friends, used to be invited out to various weddings as do the best man and speak at weddings and so on, and his brilliance obviously helped him there. And by 1913 a friend of his came up and said, "Look, would you like to join the St. Vincent de Paul Society? Come along and it'd be great if you could do a bit of work for us." And there were lots of little voluntary movements like that around, and it wasn't unusual for members to join various organizations. And the St. Vincent de Paul at that time was an organization for men. There was no women allowed in Ireland, at least at that time. And Frank joined, and it was like the match to the fuse, as it were.